My name is Marcus Parker. I just turned 28, and on the night of my birthday, my grandfather handed me a crisp white folder with one sentence printed in bold across the top. Transfer of majority ownership, Parker Innovations. It was real, signed, notarized, final. With that one act, I became the majority owner of a $95 million tech company, a legacy, a torch. A life I'd spent my entire existence working toward, and apparently, the one thing my own family never wanted me to have. Less than 2 hours after the last guest had left, my mother looked me dead in the eyes and said, "Hand the company over to James, or pack your things and get out of this house, tonight." I should have said something smart or defiant, but in that moment, all I felt was heat crawling up my throat and the kind of silence that only shame can shape. And just when I thought I'd been left completely alone, a voice echoed from the far end of the room. Low, calm, unmistakable. "I was afraid you'd say that, Eleanor." Grandpa. He leaned against the mahogany door frame with that cane of his, eyes tired but sharp. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't have to. Because he was holding something else. Something that would later upend everything. But before I tell you what was in his other hand, or how this twisted, greedy betrayal almost tore everything down, including me. Do me a favor. Let me know where you're watching from, and if you've ever been underestimated by your own family, hit that like button. Because trust me, sometimes the people who raised you are the very ones who are most afraid of who you'll become. It was supposed to be the happiest day of my life. The party was classic Parker-style high ceilings, crisp jazz, waitstaff in matching vests, and champagne that probably cost more than my car. Grandpa's estate in Los Altos Hills looked like something out of a luxury magazine, polished oak floors, panoramic views, the kind of place that smells like old money and quiet power. And for a moment, I let myself believe I belonged in it. Not as a guest, not as the poor nephew whose dad died young and who was shuffled into a rich relative's spare bedroom, but as someone who had earned it, who had shown up, year after year, holiday after holiday, not to vacation, but to work, to learn, to listen. When Grandpa raised his glass and called my name, the crowd actually gasped. "To Marcus," he said, voice soft but certain, "who has not only grown into a man I'm proud of, but into a leader this company needs." I felt my throat tighten, my vision blurred. Across the lawn, I saw my parents clapping. Robert, my uncle, technically, but the man who raised me after my father's accident kept his smile picture perfect. Eleanor's eyes sparkled with a kind of hollow warmth she had perfected over the years. And beside them, James, my cousin, tall, tailored, bored, he swirled his champagne like he was stirring soup, barely even looking at me. His jaw clenched when Grandpa dropped the bomb. "Effective immediately, I am transferring my majority ownership of Parker Innovations to Marcus." I couldn't breathe. $95 million wasn't a number I could wrap my head around, but it wasn't the money. It was the meaning. It was trust. And maybe for the first time in my life, it was recognition. I'd been the invisible one for years, the extra chair at family dinners, the charity case, the one who didn't belong in photos unless someone remembered at the last minute to say, "Oh, Marcus, come in closer." And suddenly I was the center. For 5 whole minutes, people clapped and cheered and patted my back, and for once, I let myself feel it. That was my first mistake. Later that night, the mask dropped. We were in the living room of the Parker family home, the one I'd lived in since I was 16. After my father's funeral, Robert and Eleanor had taken me in, but it always felt more like storage than shelter. That night, the crystal chandeliers glinted like cold stars. The wine glasses were emptied, but tension buzzed louder than any cork pop ever had. Robert pulled at his tie, loosening it just enough to speak. "Let's talk about this calmly," he began. "James has more experience. He's been shadowing leadership. It only makes sense." James laughed, a short, sharp exhale of superiority. "There's nothing to talk about. I'll take over as CEO. Marcus can observe, learn how it's really done, maybe run our TikTok channel." I blinked. "Excuse me." "Don't take it personal," James said, flashing the smile he used on interview panels and first dates. "You're just not cut out for this level yet." "Grandpa gave me the company," I said, Stepping forward, the documents are signed. I own it. That's when my mother knew. Eleanor stepped forward. She wasn't angry. She wasn't emotional. She was icy. You're not ready for this. Marcus, you never were. James is who this family trusts, who the board expects. You will transfer operational control to your brother by tomorrow, or you'll find your things on the curb. I opened my mouth. I really did. I wanted to scream, to ask her how long they'd planned this, how long they'd laughed behind my back. But my body froze. My brain went offline. My lungs couldn't remember how to breathe. And that's when Grandpa's voice cut through. I was afraid you'd say something like that. Eleanor. He stepped into the room with his cane in one hand and a sealed envelope in the other. That envelope would change everything. But not yet. That night, I left. No suitcase, no goodbye, just keys in hand and a heartbeat too loud to ignore. I drove aimlessly through suburban streets under the buzzing glow of traffic lights, past rows of darkened office parks, until somehow, my car turned itself. Parker Innovations. The building stood there like a sleeping giant, all steel and glass and silence. I swiped my badge. The door clicked open with a sound that felt more comforting than any welcome home I'd ever heard. The lobby smelled like lemon cleaner and ambition. I walked past the awards wall, past the patent displays, into the elevator, up to the third floor, my floor. There, tucked at the end of the corridor, was my old summer internship office. Still dusty, still mine. And there, on the top shelf, sat something forgotten by everyone but me. A boxy, outdated prototype of our first-gen server hub, the one Grandpa made me learn piece by piece, back when I was 17 and still grieving. Back when I still believed family meant protection. I sat in the old swivel chair, the leather creaking beneath me, prototype in my lap. And for the first time that night, I started to feel something other than shock. I felt purpose. Because buried inside this company, under the legalese and betrayal, was something my grandfather had taught me a decade ago, something everyone else had forgotten. And if I was right, it would save everything. Just as I closed my eyes, my phone buzzed. Subject: Extraordinary General Meeting. Immediate action required. Requested by a group of shareholders, represented by my father's law firm. So this was their play. They weren't just trying to take my home. They were coming for my company. And I wasn't going to let them. I didn't sleep that night. I couldn't. I sat in that office surrounded by dust, flickering fluorescent lights, and 37 versions of what I could have said to my family if I hadn't frozen. Every one of those fake speeches ended the same way, with them laughing, and me still walking out alone. At 3:07 a.m., I stopped replaying the humiliation and started replaying the details. Because the truth was, something didn't add up. The email that Extraordinary General Meeting was more than just corporate procedure. It was a trap, the kind that only works if the target's already stunned, already questioning everything, which I was, until now. There was no way that meeting was spontaneous. They must have planned it for weeks, probably months. The timing was too perfect. Grandpa stepping down, the ownership transfer, my birthday, and then bam, an EGM requested overnight by my father's law firm. I pulled out my laptop and started digging. 3 tabs open: company bylaws, archived emails, and my grandfather's old digital notes. He used to write everything in bullet points, with weird philosophical sidebars like no one owns the soul of a company, but someone can forget it exists. And then I found it. Clause 14.2.1, the soul clause. In the event of a transfer of majority ownership, no operational or structural changes may be enacted without the unanimous consent of all living founders or their written successors. It was buried, not even listed in the updated board reports, but there it was, Grandfather's voice etched into legal ink. And then something clicked. I remembered being 17, in that same office, disassembling the prototype server. My hands were shaking that day too. Grandpa had looked at me and said, "People will try to break what they didn't build. You protect the soul, Marcus, even if they say it doesn't matter." That wasn't just advice, that was instruction. That clause was my anchor, my leverage, my first real weapon. But I couldn't use it alone. By sunrise, I was back in my car, speeding across the quiet backroads of Palo Alto toward a modest home with an overgrown garden and wind chimes that never stopped ringing. Sarah Jenkins' place. Sarah was one of the original co-founders of Parker Innovations, CTO, engineer. And according to most part wizard, she was also the first person to believe I wasn't just the nephew, that I could actually build something. I hadn't spoken to her in 6 months, not since she left the company in frustration over vision drift, her words, not mine. But when I knocked on her door at 7:12 a.m., she opened it like she'd been expecting me. "Took you long enough," she said, holding a mug that said "Code like a girl." I blinked. "You knew." "Didn't need to, but Richard said if you ever showed up here at sunrise, I should hear you out." I stepped inside. Her living room smelled like black coffee, lemon balm, and a little bit of soldering iron. Tech parts were scattered across every surface like furniture accessories. I showed her the claws. She didn't blink. "Yeah, I remember that," she said. "Richard added it after the Series B round when investors started sniffing around with takeover eyes. He called it insurance for the company's soul." "Can it hold up?" I asked. "Only if we can prove intent. You need 2 more founding signatures to revalidate the clause publicly. I can sign, but the others, well, that's trickier." I knew who she meant. Tomas Aguilar, the original product lead, who now lived off the grid in Oregon, and Dinesh Kapoor, the financial architect, who sold his shares after a burnout episode and swore he'd never touch tech again. 2 needles in a Silicon Valley haystack. I didn't even know where to start. "So," Sarah said, reading my face, "what's the play?" I swallowed hard. "I buy time, you find Tomas, I'll fly to New Jersey for Dinesh." She nodded. "You have 72 hours before the EGM goes through." Back at headquarters, I avoided my usual parking spot. I didn't want James or anyone from the board to know I was in the building. Instead, I took the side stairs, the ones interns used when elevators were too crowded. Inside, everything looked polished, clean, efficient, like a company running on surface-level success. But behind those glass conference rooms, I could feel its suspicion. People didn't look at me like I was the boss. They looked at me like I was a rumor. Someone said, "Oh, is he back?" as I passed the second-floor cafe. Someone else whispered, "Thought James was CEO now." Their voices didn't even drop when I turned my head. I kept walking. On the 3rd floor, I passed the research wing, the one Grandpa used to call the brain. Now it was empty. Budget cuts. Because James didn't believe in R&D unless it had a PR campaign attached to it. I stopped outside a door I hadn't touched in 10 years. Grandpa's old office, frosted glass, heavy wood, untouched since he stopped coming in last year. I reached into my pocket and pulled out a key. The same key he gave me at 17. "In case you ever need to remember what this place is," he'd said. The lock clicked open. Inside, it was dark, dusty, silent. But on the shelf behind his desk, I saw a photo, me and him, in the garage, covered in grease, laughing. Behind it, a small wooden box. I opened it and found something I'd nearly forgotten. His old fountain pen, the one he used to sign every deal, every check, every moment of consequence. My chest tightened. Not because it was valuable, but because it was intentional. He wanted me to find it. This was more than memorabilia. It was a message. "Sign your name, Marcus. This is your legacy now." I pocketed the pen. On my way out, I nearly collided with James outside the elevators. He raised an eyebrow. "Didn't expect to see you back here so soon," he said, voice smooth as glass. "Just tying up a few things," I said flatly. "Look, I know it stings, but this is business. Emotions cloud judgment. You weren't built for this, Marcus." Neither was Grandpa, but he built it anyway. James smirked. "Be ready to sign over control. This EGM won't go your way." I didn't answer, because in my pocket was a pen, and in my hands a clause that could burn his whole plan to the ground. My phone buzzed. A single text from Sarah. "Found Tomas, but you're not going to like what it'll cost to get his signature." I stared at the screen, then out the window at James walking toward his Tesla like he owned the earth. And I realized I wasn't just fighting for a company anymore. I was fighting for a soul. The message from Sarah was short, but it hit like a brick. "Found Tomas, but you're not going to like what it'll cost to get his signature." I called her instantly, no small talk. Where is he? Portland, living in a converted greenhouse, running some kind of maker commune, completely off-grid, no LinkedIn, no banking apps. I had to contact him through a retired drone forum. Of course, that sounded like Tomas. Tomas Aguilar was once a legend, our original product genius, the man who built the first Parker OS kernel. Back then, he could code an entire subsystem by memory while playing bass guitar, but he'd walked away in year 5. Burnout, disillusionment, something about the soul of the company rotting in boardroom glue. He'd always been intense, but honest. He said he'd talk, Sarah continued, but only in person, and only if you agree to 3 things. Which are: 1. No legal pressure, 2. Full transparency, and 3. She hesitated. He wants a promise that if you win, you'll reinstate the company's open source ethics clause. I let that sit for a moment. The ethics clause was one of Grandpa's original tenets. Parker software would never be sold to defense contractors or used in facial recognition surveillance. James had buried it quietly 2 years ago, replaced with what he called market-aligned priorities. It had killed part of Sarah's soul. Now Tomas wanted it back in writing. I'll do it, I said. Get me a meeting. I was on a flight to Portland by evening, mind racing the whole way. 3 rows ahead, a teenager was coding on a MacBook covered in Black Lives Matter and Free Julian Assange stickers. Across the aisle, a man in a suit watched stock tickers like they were sacred scripture. 2 worlds, tech's great contradiction. And I was smack in the middle trying to honor the first while fighting off the second. When I landed, Sarah picked me up in a dusty Prius that smelled like lavender oil and burnt solder. She handed me a folded piece of paper. Tomas wrote this for you. It read, "You don't convince me with words. You convince me by remembering who we were before the money." We drove an hour east, into the kind of woods where GPS gave up and the roads turned to gravel. At the top of a ridge stood a dome-shaped greenhouse patched with solar panels, wind chimes, and handmade signs that read things like "No capitalism beyond this point." Tomas came out barefoot, wearing a paint-streaked hoodie and cargo shorts. His hair was longer than I remembered, so was his silence. He stared at me for a full minute before saying, "You got soft." "I got blindsided," I replied. He smirked. "That's worse." We sat under a hanging LED vine that cast everything in forest green. Sarah left us alone. "Why should I trust you?" Tomas asked. "You worked with them for years, sat through the board meetings, watched them gut the spirit of this company." "Because I didn't forget what this place meant." I said, "I just stopped believing I had a voice." He studied me. "You do now." I pulled out my laptop and showed him the soul clause, showed him my signed transfer papers, the video Grandpa had recorded, the letter he left in the vault. Tomas didn't blink, but his fingers drummed against the table like they were warming up to type. "And if I sign? What then?" "Then I go to New Jersey and convince Dinesh, with 3 founding signatures. The clause becomes reactivated. James can't touch the structure, and the company survives the right way." He leaned back, arms crossed. "You're still going to have to go through fire to make it work. They won't back down." "I don't need them to back down," I said. "I need them to see the smoke." He grinned, for the first time. "All right, Parker, let's light the match." He signed. Back at my hotel, I stared at the signature like it was a lottery ticket, but I knew better. This wasn't a win, it was half a win, and half a win meant nothing without Dinesh. Problem was, Dinesh Kapoor hadn't been seen publicly in 5 years. Last known address Hoboken, New Jersey, then radio silence. I called Sarah again. He ghosted everyone after that panic attack in the shareholder meeting. She said, "Word is, he's working part-time as a high school math tutor." That felt wrong, but also, somehow, right. "Can you get me an address?" "Already sent, but Marcus, he might slam the door in your face." "Then I'll knock again." Before I could book the flight, I got a call from someone I hadn't expected. "Eleanor." I let it ring, then picked up. "Marcus," she said, cold as ice. "Come home, let's talk." "Home?" I asked. "You mean the house you kicked me out of?" "You're being dramatic. This isn't personal." "No, it's worse. It's business pretending not to be personal. You're not built for this. You're too idealistic, always chasing ghosts. That's why your father—" She stopped. "Go ahead," I said, "Finish that sentence." Silence. "You think legacy is money?" I continued. "But Grandpa built this place from his convictions, from garage floor code and secondhand servers. And look what it got him." She snapped, dead and replaced by a boy with dreams and no teeth. She hung up. I didn't throw my phone. I didn't cry. I just sat there, gripping the fountain pen in my pocket until my knuckles cracked. They were scared. That's why they called. And fear, I knew, was a crack in the wall. The next morning, I booked a one-way ticket to Newark. Sarah texted me as I boarded. "James moved the EGM up. You have 58 hours. I replied, "Tell Dinesh I'm coming, and I'm not leaving without his signature." As the plane began to taxi, I got one final notification. A news alert. James Parker appointed interim CEO. Board pushes emergency leadership shift. The article included a photo of James shaking hands with a new investor. An old enemy I didn't expect to see again. They were pulling out every card. And now, I had 58 hours to stop the whole house of cards from collapsing or burying me beneath it. The New Jersey air hit different, thick, gritty, like it carried the weight of a million unspoken regrets. I stepped off the plane with just a backpack and Grandpa's fountain pen zipped tight inside the inner pocket, my only real armor. The ride from Newark to Hoboken took less than 30 minutes, but it felt longer than the entire flight. Dinesh Kapoor lived on the third floor of a walk-up in a neighborhood that smelled like old brick and hot dogs. Nothing fancy, nothing corporate, just city noise and stubborn paint. I buzzed 3 times, no answer. 4th time, a voice crackled through the intercom. "Go away. Dinesh, it's Marcus, Parker." Silence. Then, "I'm not interested. It's about the clause." I said, "The soul clause." Another beat of silence. Then, the door buzzed. I climbed the stairs 2 at a time. My legs burned, but adrenaline was doing most of the lifting now. He opened the door wearing a Rutgers hoodie and glasses smudged at the corners. He looked older, tired, but alert, like someone who hadn't slept deeply in years. "You've got 5 minutes, he said, stepping aside. Inside, his apartment looked like it belonged to someone who used to believe in things. Bookshelves jammed with software Bibles, ethics papers, framed photos of younger men in black Parker t-shirts standing beside circuit boards and pizza boxes. I recognized one photo me, at 15, hunched over a laptop, Dinesh coaching me through my first database migration. We looked happy. He caught my stare. "Don't romanticize it. That company ate me alive." "I'm not here to sell you nostalgia," I said. "I'm here because they're trying to kill what's left of it." I pulled out my laptop and opened the file, showed him Tomas's signature, Sarah's video statement, the clause, the deadline. He didn't move. "You think a signature's gonna fix it? You think dragging me out of my peace and throwing me back into boardroom war is some kind of redemption?" "No," I said. "I think it's the only shot we've got to stop the company from becoming everything you walked away from." He exhaled through his nose, looked away. I reached into my backpack and pulled out a folded piece of notebook paper, unfolded it, placed it on the table. It was a handwritten note, Grandpa's handwriting. I had found it tucked behind the photo in his old office. "Dear Dinesh, if you're reading this, it means Marcus came to find you. It also means the board's doing exactly what we always feared. I don't expect forgiveness. I only ask for your courage. One more time, Richard." Dinesh's eyes didn't well up, but they didn't blink either. He picked up the note, ran his finger along the edges, then sat down slowly at the table. "You have a pen." I pulled out the fountain pen and handed it to him without a word. He signed. Just like that, I had all 3. Back in the cab, I texted Sarah. "We're locked in, 3 out of 3. She replied instantly. "Perfect. I'll prep the filing and notarization, but you're not going to like this next part." She sent a screenshot, a press release from the Parker Innovations Board. James Parker to lead AI Defense Division. New strategic partnership with Vantax Systems confirmed. I stared at it, then read it again. Vantax Systems was a private defense contractor with a reputation for building weaponized surveillance AI. They'd been blacklisted by multiple human rights watchdogs. And now, James had cut a deal with them using our tech. Without approval, without disclosure. I felt the heat rise to my ears. My jaw clenched. This wasn't just about power anymore. This was about betrayal on a level Grandpa had feared. Sarah's follow-up text came through. If we move now, we can file a formal injunction before the EGM, but we need to present it ourselves in person. Then I'm flying back, I wrote. Not enough, she replied. You need to take the floor. I hesitated. Speaking wasn't my strong suit. James was the golden-tongued one, the guy who could pitch a startup over coffee and close a Series A before dessert. Me, I was better with code, with things that made sense. But this had nothing to do with speeches. It had everything to do with conviction. I flew back that night, straight through, no sleep. By morning, I was in Sarah's office, watching her prep the documents. The sunlight poured through the windows like a promise. She turned to me. You nervous? Terrified. Good. Means you're not lying to yourself. She handed me a manila folder. Inside certified copies of all 3 signatures, the notarized clause, and a cover letter from Grandpa dated 6 months before he died explaining the purpose of the soul clause in his own words. I held the folder like it was an inheritance, because it was. They won't see this coming, Sarah said. They think you're still licking your wounds. Then let's blindside them. The EGM was held in the top-floor conference room, chrome and glass everywhere, chairs in precise rows, board members in sleek suits, flanked by assistants with tablets and air of self-importance. James stood at the head of the table, flanked by Robert and a Vantax rep in a Navy power suit. When I walked in, their smiles faltered just a flicker, but I saw it. Marcus, James said smoothly, wasn't sure you'd come? I'm not here to watch. Then sit. We'll make this painless. Actually, I said, stepping forward, I have a motion to present. Gasps, murmurs. One board member even turned completely around. I opened the folder, laid out the documents on the table, and cleared my throat. 3 founding members have reaffirmed the soul clause. All signatures are verified and filed. That clause is ceremonial, James said, voice flat. It was, until now, under Company Bylaws 14.2.1, reactivation of the soul clause suspends all unilateral structural changes until reviewed by the Founders' Ethics Panel. There is no panel, Robert barked. There is now, Sarah said, stepping into the room behind me. She handed out binders to the stunned board members. These are the formal reappointments. Sarah Jenkins, Tomas Aguilar, Dinesh Kapoor, effective immediately. James's mouth tightened, his face drained of color. You can't just... We already did. The Vantax rep stood up. If this clause delays our integration, there will be legal consequences. I turned to him. Then sue me. And in that moment, I saw it. The board wasn't angry. They were afraid. Because for the first time, they realized I wasn't the backup. I was the firewall. The moment the clause landed on the boardroom table, the atmosphere changed. You could feel it in the temperature of the air, like someone had cracked open a window in a sealed room full of smoke. People weren't talking anymore. They were recalculating. For the first time in years, the Parker boardroom wasn't dominated by James's polished sound bites or Robert's thinly veiled threats. The conversation now revolved around ethics, founders' intent, and one question that no one wanted to say out loud. What if Marcus is actually right? But this wasn't the victory. It was just the beginning of war. By the next morning, headlines were swirling. Parker family power struggle erupts over secret founders clause. Tech heiress, Eleanor Parker silent as grandson blocks $400 million defense deal. And my favorite, from a small but vicious tech ethics blog, the nephew strikes back. I should have been thrilled, but I wasn't. Because James wasn't sitting still, and I knew it. At 11:04 a.m., I received an email. Subject internal audit alert. Allegation of misuse of corporate assets. The body vague, weaponized, cold. They were accusing me of unauthorized access to confidential data and systems, citing the night I stayed in the office after the birthday party. And they were using my loyalty against me. They're calling it digital trespass, Sarah said, pacing in her office. It was my office. I snapped, my badge. I didn't touch anything I wasn't allowed to. You don't have to convince me, she said. You have to stay 2 moves ahead. That afternoon, I held a press briefing in the atrium of the Parker Innovations campus. Not a flashy one, no stage, no podium, just a circle of journalists, a mic, and a projector screen. I stood beside Tomas and Dinesh. Sarah live-streamed the whole thing. I opened with this. I'm not here to fight over titles. I'm here to protect a company that was never meant to serve power, but to serve people. I clicked to the first slide. This is the soul clause. It was written to safeguard the integrity of our innovation to prevent this company from becoming a tool of oppression or exploitation. Next slide. These are the 3 founding members, and their signatures. This clause is now active. I looked straight into the camera. And yes, the board is welcome to pursue legal action, but so are we for unauthorized partnership activities, breach of founder trust, and deliberate ethical misconduct. Reporters went wild. The stock dropped 4% by end of day, and I could almost feel James grinding his teeth from 5 floors up. By nightfall, the gloves were off. James called for a vote of no confidence to oust me from operational control, even with the clause in place. It was symbolic, but potentially damaging if enough board members flipped. I needed a countermove, fast, and I knew exactly where to find it. Back in Grandpa's study, I returned to the estate that night not to fight, but to remember. The house was mostly dark. Staff had been let go after the last restructure. Robert and Eleanor were likely out spinning damage control. But the door creaked open like it remembered me. I walked past the hall of portraits, saw my father's face on the wall, younger, braver, and forever locked in a time before ambition poisoned everything. Inside the study, the scent of cedar and leather hit me like a memory. Everything was still in place. The chessboard, the framed patent, the globe he used to spin when telling me about markets in Tokyo and Oslo. And then, tucked in the corner of the bookshelf, behind Atlas, shrugged, which Grandpa hated, I found it. A red notebook. The kind with thick pages and a cracked spine. Inside, handwritten entries, lists, diagrams. It was a ledger, but not of finances. Of people. He had been keeping records, real, human ones. Seth, employees passed over for promotion due to class bias. Engineers blackballed for whistleblowing. Women who left after quiet reassignments. Contracts that had ethical loopholes forced in by outside counsel. It wasn't gossip, it was evidence. And at the very end, a list titled Redemption Candidates, people Grandpa believed deserved a second chance. Some were names I recognized. One stood out. Leah Donnelly, former VP of Product Integrity, forced out by Robert in 2020. Next to her name, knows where the AI surveillance logs are buried. I called her. She didn't answer. So I sent one line. I think Richard would have wanted you in the room. 10 minutes later, she called back. You found the red book, she said. He wanted you on the inside, still does. Silence. James erased the logs, she said, but I saved backups, encrypted, stored outside the system. Can you prove Vantax accessed Parker data before the partnership was disclosed? Yes. Then I need you in San Francisco by morning. Already booked. She said, let's finish what your grandfather started. The next day, during the board's emergency session, James stood to address the vote. He was smug, smiling, polished in a blue tailored suit. Let's not allow sentimental distractions to interfere with progress, he said. We are building a future, and futures require strong hands, not soft hearts. I let him talk. Then I stood, holding the red notebook in one hand and a flash drive in the other. Funny, I said, because Grandpa didn't think ethics were sentimental. He thought they were survival. I clicked the flash drive into the room's smart console. On-screen time-stamped server pings, unlisted protocols, facial detection code mapping to Vantax APIs 6 weeks before the partnership was announced. Gasps, phones out, panic. James froze. This is misinterpreted. No, Leah said. Stepping forward, this is betrayal of our values, our users, and our founders. Then the doors opened. A process server stepped in. James Parker, you've been served. Everyone turned. Inside the envelope, a formal investigation notice for corporate espionage and ethics fraud. The boardroom erupted. But me, I just turned to the portrait of Grandpa hanging behind the screen. And for the first time, I saw him smile back. There's a silence that doesn't just land in a room, it sinks. That's what followed the server's announcement. For the first time, James Parker looked like a man who had no more cards left to play. The envelope in his hand might as well have been a hand grenade. I watched his fingers tremble as he tore it open, scanning the pages, eyes darting, lips twitching, a single bead of sweat breaking across his temple. "This is a stunt," he muttered. "No," I said, my voice steady, "this is accountability." Sarah stepped beside me. Leah stood firm on the opposite side. Dinesh and Tomas joined from the back of the room, the original minds behind everything James thought he controlled. The board didn't speak, not yet, but their body language told a story. They were recalculating again. This wasn't about Marcus the kid anymore. This was about Marcus, the firewall, just as I'd promised. That night, Sarah and I sat in the garage. Not the company's garage, Grandpa's. It was exactly as I remembered: cobwebs in the corners, an old Dell server tower on the bench, a coffee-stained whiteboard with the words "Stay Useful" still faintly visible in dry erase ghost script. I sat on the oil-stained stool he used to pull out for me as a kid. Sarah leaned against the car, arms crossed, quiet. "What now?" I asked. "Now," she said, "now we wait, board review, legal procedure, internal vote. He'll try to spin it. Let him try. Half the press already flipped sides, and the ethics forums are calling you a founder revivalist." I laughed, soft, tired. "I never wanted a revolution," I said. "No one ever wants one," she replied. "They just wake up one day and realize they're standing in the middle of it." The next 48 hours were a blur of affidavits, legal signatures, and corporate chess. The Parker board officially placed James under internal investigation. He was suspended indefinitely. Robert tried to wrangle support to block my vote of reinstatement, but he didn't have enough leverage, not anymore. And Eleanor, she didn't show her face. Not once. I half expected a last-minute ambush, a media blitz, a slander campaign. But nothing came. She was watching. I knew that, but she wasn't ready to move. Not yet. On the morning of the vote, I walked back into the boardroom with the same pen Grandpa gave me on my 12th birthday. Not a Parker brand smart stylus. Not some over-designed ergonomic clicker. Just a classic black fountain pen, heavy in the hand, reliable. A reminder. "This meeting will come to order," announced Melina, the board chairwoman, trying to keep her voice neutral. "The vote today pertains to Marcus Richard Parker's motion for executive reinstatement with structural oversight privileges under Clause 17A. The air was still. No cameras, just 12 people and the weight of 3 decades of legacy. One by one, they cast their votes. Yes. Yes. No. Yes. Yes. When it came to Robert, he stared me down, cold, calculated. Abstain. He wanted me to see that not defeat, but disdain. Final vote 9-2. 1 abstention. Motion passed. I was back. But not as CEO. As custodian of legacy, a role that hadn't existed on paper until yesterday, crafted by Tomas, backed by Sarah, ratified by the remaining founders. It gave me final oversight on all structural decisions related to AI deployment, data ethics, and innovation purpose. James could sell shares, Eleanor could posture. But they couldn't rewrite the DNA of the company ever again. Not without me. Later that night, I walked through the atrium alone. The press was gone. The boardroom lights were off. Just the hum of the server room in the distance and the faint smell of someone's leftover Thai food. I found myself in front of the sculpture wall, the one Grandpa had commissioned back when the company first went public. 12 metal plates, each etched with a principle, and build for good. Protect the user. Never trade trust for growth. Code is promise. I ran my fingers over the last one. Code is promise. That was his favorite. The one he always pointed to when I started whining about school or failure. "Marcus," he'd say, "a company can be dismantled, a system can be hacked, but a promise, that's a currency they can't devalue." That line hit different now. Because I realized this wasn't just his company, it was mine now, too. And with it came a burden I had spent most of my life running from. Responsibility. Sarah found me there, holding a folded sheet of paper. Eleanor just submitted a shareholder grievance. She said she's pushing for a special review panel to challenge the clause. Can she? I asked. Technically, sure, but the court of public opinion's not on her side. Yet. Sarah nodded, then hesitated. She's not going to stop. Marcus! Neither are we. She smiled, slow and tired. By the way, she added, Leah's staying on, as ethics director. Good, she deserves that. And Tomas wants to rebuild the R&D garage. Like the original. With kids from underserved districts, teach them how to code. I blinked, swallowed hard. That wasn't a victory. That was a future. Just as I was about to leave, I got a call. Unknown number. I picked up. Hello? Silence. Then a familiar voice. You think this is over, Eleanor said, calm and cold. You have no idea what you've started. I didn't start it, I replied. You did, when you forgot who built this company and why. You think you've won something, but this isn't about clauses or votes. It's about control. You're right, I said, and the people who built this place just took it back. She didn't respond. But I heard the click as she ended the call. As I looked out over the quiet atrium, something caught my eye. On the central screen, an alert. System update. Vantax trace reactivated. My blood went cold. Someone had triggered a hidden protocol inside our system. The war wasn't over. It had just gone underground. The red alert pulsed softly on the central screen like a heartbeat I didn't recognize, steady, silent, and sinister. System update. Vantax trace reactivated. I stared at it for a second too long. Then everything snapped into motion. Sarah, I called, spinning toward her. She was already at the nearest terminal, fingers flying across the keys. It's a ghost protocol, she said, hidden inside the old DevOps branch. Someone embedded it deep like it was meant to survive even a purge. Can you isolate it? Already working on it, but Marcus, this isn't just a trace, it's a backdoor. If Vantax reactivates this fully, they'll have real-time access to every camera and audio stream running on Parker hardware. I felt my stomach drop. Even in private homes. She nodded, grim. They built a mirror net. It's not just code, it's intent. Someone wanted this to live beyond us. And just like that, I realized something chilling. This wasn't James. This wasn't Eleanor either. This was bigger. Leah joined us within 10 minutes, pulling logs from backup drives. These keys, they're not ours, she said. They're proprietary Vantax structure, but someone from Parker gave them direct access months ago. While the clause was still dormant, I muttered. Sarah froze. There's an install signature tied to Eleanor's former chief of staff, Devin Cole. My mind flashed back to him, quiet, polite, always in the background taking notes, the kind of man people forget to suspect. Find him. We traced the last login to a private server in Menlo Park off-grid, masked IP, but we found it. Dinesh worked through the night with 2 former cyber defense contractors Grandpa had quietly mentored. I pulled strings with a friend at the FCC's Digital Ethics Division, sent over Leah's documentation and the footage from our discovery. By morning, Devin Cole had been served. He cracked after 6 hours. Confessed everything. He'd been approached by a Vantax liaison posing as an independent consultant, promised equity, an executive future. He didn't even understand the full scope, just followed orders. It was just code, he kept saying, but it wasn't. It was a breach of soul. And that's something we don't forgive in Parker Innovations. The board acted fast. They authorized a full rebuild of the infrastructure stack, scrubbed every Vantax-related protocol, fingerprint, and relay path. We reached out to privacy watchdogs, open source communities, even former critics of Parker. We brought them in. To test, to verify, to trust again. It was hell, it took weeks. But it worked. And when the dust settled, something unexpected happened. The company's public trust rating hit a 6-year high. Not because we were flawless, but because we were honest. And in tech, that's rarer than gold. Weeks later, I found myself standing in front of a classroom in Newark. It was the first day of Parker's Legacy Garage program, just 10 kids, 2 mentors, and a room full of salvaged hardware. I was supposed to give an opening speech. Instead, I sat on the edge of a cracked wooden desk and pulled out Grandpa's fountain pen. Held it up. This pen, I said, was given to me by the man who built the first server for Parker Innovations. He didn't give it to me because I was the smartest, or the loudest, or the one with the fancy degree. He gave it to me because I stayed. I paused, looked around at 10 pairs of wide, curious eyes. He believed that no matter how broken things get, you can always rebuild, if you're brave enough to stay. Back at headquarters, the sculpture wall had a new plate added. Truth is the foundation. We made it the first one people saw when they entered the building. Sarah, now CTO, touched it every morning, a ritual. Tomas retired soon after said the war was over, and it was time to teach full-time. He still sends me voice notes when he hears the company did something unusually decent. Leah built a new ethics AI protocol, one that flags internal conflicts of interest before decisions go up the ladder. She named it Soul Check. I didn't argue. Dinesh. He's finally smiling again, like something weighty had been lifted after years of silence. And me, I stayed out of the C-suite, kept the custodian of legacy title, but refused a corner office. I work in a glass-walled space on the second floor, half library, half lab, just enough room for books, code, and silence. Sometimes people ask why I didn't take CEO. I tell them the crown was never the point. As for Eleanor, she disappeared from headlines, but we knew she was moving, funding new ventures, building something quiet, probably waiting for the right time to re-emerge. She wasn't done, but neither were we. And now, we had something more powerful than fear. We had memory. We had community. We had each other. Some nights I still visit the garage. Same stool, same smell of solder and dust. I sit with the red notebook in my lap, reading Grandpa's handwriting. Sometimes I cry. Sometimes I laugh. Sometimes I just breathe. But always I remember why we fought. Not to win, but to restore, to protect, to build something worth leaving behind. So if you're watching this right now, wondering if you should walk away or stay, ask yourself one thing. Whose legacy are you living and whose are you creating? Because revenge can burn fast. But justice builds cathedrals out of scars. And I intend to build one that stands long after I'm gone. Story 2. My name is Sarah Monroe. I'm 27 years old. And last week, my parents gave away the car I spent 5 years building with my own hands to my younger brother, as if I didn't exist, as if my work, my sweat, my identity belonged to him by default. You might think I'm exaggerating, that maybe I'm being dramatic, but what would you call it when your family wraps a bow around your blood and bone and hands it to someone else with a smile? This isn't just a story about a car, it's about being invisible your whole life, until one day, you snap. Let me take you back. I grew up in a quiet suburb outside Milwaukee, Wisconsin, not the flashy kind of neighborhood. Think faded American flags on front porches, 2-car garages, and barbecue grills that only Dad could touch. My family fit right in, at least on the surface. My dad, Jack Monroe, was a maintenance supervisor for a factory that made packaging equipment. Blue collar, clock in, clock out, dependable as duct tape. My mom, Linda, taught 3rd grade at the local elementary school, PTA regular, bake sale champion, the kind of woman who called everyone honey but reserved her sharpest tones for me. Then there was Ethan, 2 years younger than me, blonde-haired, blue-eyed, dimpled smile that could sell church raffle tickets to atheists. He was the golden child, star pitcher on the high school baseball team, class vice president, prom king. He could crash my bike, break a window, flunk a test, and somehow, I'd be the one grounded. I still remember one Thanksgiving when I accidentally spilled gravy on Grandma's lace tablecloth. I was 14. Ethan, meanwhile, had dented Dad's truck 2 hours earlier, backing out of the driveway drunk. Guess who got the silent treatment for a week? But hey, boys will be boys. Right. I stopped trying to compete pretty early on. Instead, I found something they didn't understand, something mine. Cars. I wasn't supposed to love them. Girls like me were supposed to go into nursing, or teaching, or HR. But by 16, I was stealing hours in Dad's garage, watching YouTube videos on carburetor rebuilds. By 18, I knew the difference between a torque wrench and a breaker bar, and by 22, I found her a 1967 Ford Mustang Fastback, stripped, sun-bleached, rusted at the seams. She looked like hell. I loved her instantly. I bought her from a guy named Mitch who ran a junkyard outside Waukesha, paid $2,400 cash I'd saved from waitressing, tutoring math, and selling sketches on Etsy. My parents thought I was insane. You should be saving for a condo. Sarah, Mom had said, not playing with junk like some grease monkey. I didn't argue. I'd learned silence was safer. What they didn't know is that working on that car was the only time I felt fully alive. The metal didn't judge me. The bolts didn't talk over me. The engine didn't call me dramatic. I named her Frankie after Frankenstein because she was stitched together from a dozen donor parts. I spent nights in the cold, hands bleeding from busted knuckles, with oil-stained manuals and a Bluetooth speaker playing classic rock. I learned how to weld from a retired mechanic named Deborah who ran a garage 2 towns over. I filmed my progress and posted it in bite-sized clips on TikTok. Nobody in my family followed me. They didn't even ask. Except Ethan. Once. "Is that piece of crap still in the garage?" he said during dinner one night. "You know you'll never actually finish it, right?" That was 2 years ago. Fast forward to last month. The Mustang was finally done. She purred like a lion and looked like a dream candy apple red. White racing stripes, hand-stitched leather seats. I'd never been prouder of anything. I even installed a plaque behind the driver's seat that said, "Built by hands that were never seen." No one in my family noticed. Until they did. It started with small comments. "Wow," Dad muttered. "Passing through the garage, didn't think you'd get that engine running." "Must be nice to have that kind of time," Mom said. "Folding laundry." But the worst came from Ethan. "You know," he smiled one day, running a hand along the hood, "this would be a killer ride for job interviews." I blinked. "What?" "I mean, come on, who's more likely to get use out of it? You bike to work half the time. I've got 2 interviews in Chicago this month." I laughed, thought he was joking. He wasn't. The family dinner that Sunday was when the blow came. Dad raised his glass cheap red wine from Trader Joe's and said, "To Ethan, for finally getting back on track, and for the new journey ahead." He paused. "And to mark the occasion, your mom and I decided the Mustang should go to him. He's earned it." The words didn't register at first. The table was silent. I looked around, waiting for someone to laugh. No one did. I opened my mouth, but the words choked. What I finally whispered. Mom smiled like she was offering me a casserole. "Sweetie, you've had your fun with it. You've learned your skills. But Ethan needs something real to help him move forward." "But it's mine," I said. My voice cracked. "I bought it. I rebuilt it." Dad leaned back. "You rebuilt it in our garage, using our tools, on our time. This was always a family effort." I stood up, my legs were trembling. "Don't do this," I said, but it was already done. Ethan had the keys in his hand. He didn't even look guilty. And that's when I realized something. I could either walk away quietly like always, or I could remind them who the hell I really was. They thought the Mustang was a gift. They had no idea it was a weapon. I didn't sleep that night. I lay in bed, fully clothed, staring at the ceiling fan spinning like the world was still turning as if mine hadn't just shattered into silence. My hands twitched against the sheets. The smell of motor oil still clung to my skin from the last time I cleaned Frankie's undercarriage. But now she wasn't mine, not according to them. They gave her away, just gave her. The next morning, I woke up to the sound of the garage door opening. I flew out of bed barefoot, adrenaline buzzing through my legs. I yanked the curtain open and saw Ethan already inside the Mustang, fumbling with the seat adjustment. He looked like a kid in a costume, drowning in something too big for him. That image pierced me. He didn't belong in that car. I didn't even bother putting on shoes. I ran down the stairs, across the cold concrete floor, and out into the driveway. "Get out," I said. He looked up, startled. "Jesus, Sarah." "Get out." Ethan rolled his eyes. "Relax, I'm just trying it out. Dad said I could." I didn't. He leaned back in the driver's seat and tapped the steering wheel. "I've got interviews. You ride your bike, remember?" That line. That smug, entitled, casual dismissal like I was some weird accessory in his golden boy narrative. "You didn't build her," I said, quietly now. My voice was shaking, but not with fear, with fury. "You don't know what she sounds like cold-started in February." You've never cleaned gunk out of her car with a toothbrush at 2 a.m. You don't know her. She's a car, he said flatly, not your soulmate. I opened the passenger door, then act like she's a car and get out. But he didn't. He turned the key. The engine didn't catch on the first try. She coughed. I winced like I'd been slapped. I'd tuned that starter myself. Ethan, I grabbed the key, yanked it out. I'm serious. Don't touch her again. He got out, tossing the key in my direction like it was a pack of gum. I didn't even want this stupid car until you got so dramatic about it, he muttered, brushing past me. You always make everything so intense. That word again, dramatic. Too emotional, too sensitive, too much. They'd been saying it since I was 12. The first time I cried when Mom forgot to pick me up from the school art show, dramatic. The time I saved up $40 to buy my own socket set and Dad said it was a waste because you'll get bored in a week, dramatic. When I stayed in the garage all weekend during senior prom, welding a quarter panel while the other girls were taking selfies in sparkly dresses, definitely dramatic. And now I was being dramatic for wanting to keep the thing I built with every ounce of me. I stood in the garage long after Ethan had gone, hand resting on Frankie's fender, breathing in the scent of gasoline, steel, and betrayal. My phone buzzed. A text from Mom. Let's be adults about this. Sarah, Ethan needs the car. You don't. Be the bigger person. I stared at the screen. For once, I didn't cry. Instead, I walked back into the house, pulled the drawer open under the sink, and grabbed the thick navy blue folder I'd kept for years, Frankie's life story title. Registration, receipts, restoration photos, custom work logs, even my first hand-drawn concept sketch. Not one paper bore my parents' names. That afternoon, I drove Frankie out to the edge of town, just us. No GPS, no music, just wind and engine. It was late September, and the trees were turning gold, orange, rust. I pulled over at a scenic overlook near Lake Geneva, opened the trunk, and attached the small metal plaque I'd had made but never mounted. Built by hands that were never seen. I drilled it into the rear panel with slow, deliberate turns of the screwdriver. 1, 2, 3, 4 screws. I stepped back. She looked complete. Then I took out my phone and hit record. Hi, I'm Sarah, and if you're seeing this, it's because my family tried to erase me. I filmed Frankie in full, every curve, every stitch, every restored inch. I told the camera about the 5 years of work, the thousands of dollars I scraped together, the hours I sacrificed. Then I told them what happened. How my parents decided my car wasn't mine. How my brother claimed my effort because he needed help. I ended the clip holding the camera toward the back of the car, the plaque gleaming in the fall sun. Built by hands that were never seen. I posted the video with a single caption. Not your car, Ethan. I didn't expect what happened next. It exploded. Hundreds of comments in an hour, then thousands. Girls who'd been overlooked. Women who rebuilt motorcycles in silence. Artists who'd had their work stolen by boyfriends, brothers, bosses. Everyone had a Frankie, everyone had an Ethan. I went to bed with 114 followers. I woke up with 72,000. And then the DMs started, including one from a woman named Zoe Tran, an organizer of the Midwest Women in Mechanics Showcase, an invite-only competition for women who rebuild vintage cars. We'd love to feature Frankie, she wrote, and your story deserves a bigger engine. But I couldn't think about that yet. Because back at home, Ethan had just realized his TikTok was flooded with thousands of comments tagging him, calling him a thief, an entitled golden boy. My phone buzzed again. Dad. Missed call number 6. I didn't answer. Then another buzz. A text. Come home, now we need to talk. This isn't how family handles things. I stared at the screen, heart thudding, not from fear, from resolve. They wanted to talk. They could talk to Frankie's new audience. And they could watch what happened next. Because I had just accepted Zoe Tran's invitation. And I was about to show the entire Midwest who really built this machine. I didn't go home that night. Instead, I booked a cheap room off the highway using points from my old job's travel rewards, the kind of motel with chipped paint and vending machines that still took quarters. I parked Frankie just outside my window, where I could see her like she was guarding me for once. The video had crossed 1.3 million views by morning. I had 3 missed calls from my mom, 2 from Ethan, and 1 pitiful voicemail from Dad that just said, "We didn't mean for it to go this far." Too late. For 27 years, I'd been taught to keep my voice down, to be the good daughter, to smile when I was being erased, and now that people were finally listening, I wasn't going to shut up. The invitation from Zoe at the Midwest Women in Mechanics Showcase was the first time someone looked at Frankie and saw me. I messaged her back. "Yes, count me in. What do I need to do?" She replied within the hour, her tone all exclamation marks and warm fire. "Bring your car, bring your story, we'll cover your spot, you're already the headline." I sat on the bed with the curtains drawn, phone in one hand, the hotel coffee in the other burnt, bitter, barely drinkable, and I cried. Not the sobbing kind, the quiet, shaking kind, where tears run straight down and fall onto your t-shirt like punctuation marks. That night, I posted another clip. This time, it wasn't about revenge. It was about the build. Frankie's timeline. A fast-cut montage rusted hood to gleaming chrome. The late nights, the welding sparks, my bleeding palms and oil-smudged cheeks. I added a voiceover. They thought it was just a car, but this was never about horsepower. This was about building something they couldn't take credit for. That video hit 1 million in 12 hours. In the comments, women tagged their friends, daughters tagged their moms, fathers tagged their daughters. A few even said, "My dad would never have done this to me." But more said, "Mine did, and I never spoke up until now." That got me. This wasn't just about Ethan anymore. This was about every girl who got socks for Christmas while her brother got a new bike. About every woman whose promotion was handed to a less qualified man. About every invisible pair of hands behind every success story that had someone else's name on it. I was part of something now. Something bigger than Frankie. Bigger than me. But I still had one final stop to make before I drove to the showcase. I needed the title. Legally, Frankie was mine. I'd paid for her, restored her, maintained her, and all the documentation was in that blue folder under my passenger seat, but I'd never formally updated the title with the state DMV. The previous owner, Mitch, had signed it, but I hadn't filed the change. Stupid. I know I just never thought anyone would dare take her. I scheduled an appointment online and pulled up to the DMV on a Wednesday afternoon, heart pounding like I was about to walk into a courtroom. I handed the clerk everything: the signed title, the bill of sale, the restoration receipts, even photos. She squinted at the documents, stamped a few forms, and finally said, "All right, you're the registered owner now. You want custom plates?" I didn't hesitate. "Yeah," I said, "make it BY her." She smiled. "That for your mom or something?" I smiled back. "Something like that." Outside. The autumn wind whipped at my jacket. I stood next to Frankie and exhaled. This was what victory felt like. Not fireworks, not confetti, just the quiet click of a stamp on paper and the knowledge that, this time, no one could touch what I'd built. Or so I thought. When I got back to the motel, the front desk clerk, an older guy with thick glasses and a sad little mustache, waved me over. "You've got a guest," he said. "Been waiting an hour." I froze. No one knew where I was. Except, tall guy, blonde, kinda talks like he owns the world. He nodded. "That's the one. Said he's your brother." My stomach dropped. I walked slowly to my room. Ethan was sitting on the floor outside the door, arms crossed, wearing his old varsity hoodie, the one Mom framed in a shadow box. "Finally," he said, standing up. "What do you want?" He looked tired, not in the hungover way, in the pushed off the pedestal kind of way. "I didn't know the video would blow up like that." He started, "You really didn't have to go nuclear. Sarah." "I didn't go nuclear," I said. "I went honest." He ran a hand through his hair. "You made me look like a monster." I blinked. "I didn't make you anything." There was a pause. He shifted his weight, suddenly unsure of himself. "I didn't mean to take the car," he mumbled. "They just said it was already mine. I thought you were okay with it. You didn't fight them." "Because I've spent my entire life not fighting them. And look where that got me." He looked down at his sneakers. "So, what now?" "I'm driving Frankie to the showcase in Madison. Then I'm deciding what comes next." He nodded slowly. And then he pulled something from his hoodie pocket. A key. Frankie's key. I kept it, I'm sorry. I took it back, not gently, not cruelly either, just firmly, like someone reclaiming their breath. You can't fix this with one gesture, I said, but you can start by not making it worse. He looked like he wanted to say something else, but didn't. Just nodded again and turned away. As I watched him walk to his car, I wondered for the first time, had he ever been told no in his life? Had he ever had to earn something? Probably not. And that was never his fault, not entirely, but it wasn't mine either. I went back into the room, locked the door behind me, and dropped the key into my bag. Tomorrow, I was hitting the road. The showcase was 3 days away. But someone else had taken notice, someone I never expected. Because while my second video was going viral, a certain news producer had reached out. And she wasn't just looking for a car story. She was looking for me. The message came in the middle of the night. Subject line, your Mustang story, national feature. It was from a producer named Danielle Torres from a major digital media outlet, one of those fast-rising platforms that specialize in human interest stories with cinematic edits and millions of views. I reread the email 3 times. She said the moment she saw the plaque on the back of the car, built by hands that were never seen, she felt something click, that it wasn't just a clever line, it was a wound, a rallying cry. She wanted to feature my build, my story, my voice. I should have been thrilled, and part of me was, but the other part, terrified. Because now, there was no backing down, no folding back into silence. This wasn't just Ethan and my parents anymore. This was the world watching. Strangers who didn't owe me anything were suddenly rooting for me, expecting something from me. And I hadn't even made it to the showcase yet. Still, I wrote Danielle back. Yes, I'm in. I'll be in Madison for the Midwest Women in Mechanics Showcase. Come find me there. It was real now. The next morning, I packed up my things, checked out of the motel, and hit the road. The drive to Madison felt like a pilgrimage. Long stretches of I-94 blurred past cornfields, faded billboards, diners clinging to time. Frankie hummed beneath me like she knew where we were going. She was smooth, powerful, proud. The wind through the half-cracked window carried the scent of autumn leaves and cold metal. I wasn't driving a car anymore. I was driving a statement. By the time I pulled into the conference center parking lot, my nerves had caught up with me. The place was buzzing with chrome and color classic Camaros, rebuilt Impalas, vintage Dodge Challengers gleaming like museum pieces. And then there were the women grease-streaked, jean-clad, laughing, lifting hoods and clinking sockets like a symphony. I felt both out of place and entirely at home. Zoe found me within minutes. She was even shorter in person, barely 5 feet, but she had the presence of a stadium. Worn boots, a tool belt slung low on her hips, and a grin that said she'd seen every kind of mantry and lived to outwrench it. You must be Sarah, she said, eyes sparkling. And that must be Frankie. I nodded. Suddenly shy, she's here. Zoe whistled low as she circled the car. Girl, this isn't just a rebuild, this is resurrection. We rolled Frankie into the main exhibition space together. I handed over my documentation, then stepped back and watched her settle under the fluorescent lights. She looked different here, like she belonged on a stage. That night, I stayed in a shared bunk room with 2 other women, Rena, who rebuilt vintage Harleys, and Carla, a welder who restored old fire trucks. They didn't ask about the drama online, they didn't need to. We all knew what it was like to be doubted before we even touched the wrench. Rena handed me a beer without a word. Carla showed me a scar on her wrist from an angle grinder accident and said, "You don't leave a mark unless you're doing real work." That hit deep. The showcase officially opened the next morning. Crowds poured in, cameras, influencers, college students, mechanics, skeptics. My segment was set for mid-afternoon. I spent the morning pacing, pretending to check torque specs and tire pressure. Zoe kept giving me thumbs up from across the room. And then I saw her. Danielle, the producer. Polished, calm, and holding a camera crew like it was an extension of her mind. She walked straight up to me and shook my hand like we'd already met. You ready? She asked. No, I said, but I'm here. She smiled. Same thing. The interview started beside Frankie. I stood stiffly at first, answering questions like I was in a job interview. But when Danielle asked, "What does this car really mean to you?" I broke open. I told her about the nights in the garage, the voice in my head that sounded like my mom, always asking, "Why can't you be normal?" I told her about Ethan, the Mustang dinner, the way the key felt in his hand like a verdict. And then I told her about the plaque, what it stood for. Not just me, but the entire invisible lineage of women who'd been told to sit down, step back, be quiet. When we finished, Danielle looked at her cameraman and whispered, "That's the shot." I exhaled. Then came the judging. The 3 showcase judges weren't influencers. They were the real deal master mechanics, welders, engineers. One was a woman who'd worked at Ford since the 80s. She opened Frankie's hood, examined the weld seams, ran her fingers along the stitching of the seats, then looked at me. "Did you do the body work?" "Yes," I said. "Welding. Every panel. Interior. Custom stitched. I watched tutorials, took classes." She nodded. "Drivetrain. Pulled the engine myself. Rebuilt it in my dad's garage. Took me 3 winters." The judge glanced at her notes. Then she smiled. "This car isn't just clean," she said. "She's yours, every inch." I didn't win the showcase. Not officially. But later that night, Zoe pulled me aside and said, "You broke the internet again. You're trending on TikTok, Twitter, Reddit, and the organizers just added a new segment next year." I blinked. "What segment?" She grinned. "First time builder spotlight, and you're the logo." I laughed, then cried, then laughed again. But the true twist? Danielle's crew had already uploaded a teaser of my interview, and it was climbing fast. Thousands of comments, tens of thousands of shares. And one comment caught my eye. It was from a private account, no photo, but the name. Linda Monroe. My mother. The comment was short. "I watched this 3 times. I'm sorry I never saw you." I stared at the screen, heart slamming, because just then, my phone buzzed. A text from a number I didn't recognize. "Your father and I want to come see Frankie, in person, if you'll let us." I stared at the message. "Your father and I want to come see Frankie, in person, if you'll let us." 12 words, just enough to stir the dust in every part of me that still wanted their approval and to set off every alarm that said, "Don't fall for it again." But I couldn't deny the shift. Mom's comment on the video had been real. She didn't do apologies. Ever. The last time I heard "I'm sorry" from her, I was 8, and even then it came wrapped in a lecture about how hard parenting is. So this felt different. But it didn't feel safe, not yet. I didn't reply right away. I needed space, and besides, I had work to do. Because after Danielle's teaser went viral, Frankie wasn't just a symbol anymore, she was a movement. People were tagging me in their own builds, in stories of being erased. One woman spray-painted, built by hands they never saw on the side of a barn she'd converted into an auto shop. Another stitched the phrase into a denim jacket and mailed it to me. My inbox became a time capsule of female rage and redemption. And I realized if they were watching, I had to give them more than closure. I had to show them what reclaiming power looked like. So I came up with a plan. I didn't tell anyone except Zoe, who blinked at me once, then grinned so wide it nearly split her face. "You sure?" she said. "I've never been more sure." "Then let's make it unforgettable." That Saturday, the final day of the showcase, Zoe announced a surprise feature, a live-streamed road challenge for select builds, 3 cars, 1 camera crew, a 30-mile loop through Madison's scenic backroads, judged on handling, control, and presentation. Frankie was one of them. And guess who I invited as spectators? My parents. I texted Mom back. "If you want to see her, come to the showcase on Saturday. She'll be moving." Short, firm, not begging. She replied within 5 minutes. "We'll be there." Saturday morning. The sky was cloudless, crisp Wisconsin autumn at its finest. Frankie was polished to perfection, the chrome on her grille sharp as a blade, the white stripes gleaming like lightning bolts across her hood. I'd mounted 2 new GoPros inside, one facing the dash, the other catching my face. This wasn't just a race. It was a reckoning. The crowd gathered at the start line, buzzing with energy. Danielle's team was live streaming across 3 platforms. My inbox was already flooded with watchers from as far as Brazil and the UK. Then I spotted them. Dad, hands in pockets, his face unreadable. Mom, clutching her purse like it was a shield. And Ethan, he stood behind them, arms folded, jaw tight. He didn't look angry. He looked exposed. I didn't wave. I climbed into Frankie, buckled in, and stared at the horizon. The flag dropped. Frankie launched. The route twisted through forested turns, past lakeside overlooks, across narrow bridges that rattled beneath our tires. I let her roar. I wanted the world to hear her voice, to hear my voice. The judges were tracking handling and control, but Danielle's stream was tracking something else, justice in motion. The sun flared off the windshield. I felt sweat on my palms, but my grip was steady, my jaw tight, my spine straight. Frankie hugged every curve like she was dancing, not racing. And the whole time, I wasn't thinking about speed. I was thinking about being underestimated. I was thinking about that dinner table, that key. That look in Ethan's eyes when he turned the engine like it belonged to him. I was thinking about every time I sat quiet so someone else could feel big. And then I passed the final checkpoint. Screeching back into the lot, I saw the crowd erupt, not for the speed though I'd set the best time, but because they felt what just happened. This wasn't a race. It was a reclaiming. I stepped out of the car, engine ticking with heat, sweat running down my neck. And there they were. Mom, Dad, Ethan, waiting. Mom came forward first. Her voice was soft. She's beautiful. I nodded. She always was. Dad stepped in, clearing his throat like he was about to give a toast. We didn't understand, not really. Thought it was just a project, a hobby. We didn't see. That's the point. I said, you didn't see. He nodded, silent. Then Ethan stepped forward. He didn't say anything at first. Then, can I talk to you? I looked at him, really looked. Not as my brother, not as the golden boy, just a man who'd finally been knocked off center. Here's good, I said. Say what you need to say. He shifted. I was wrong. About the car, about all of it. I didn't get it, and I didn't want to get it, because if I did, I'd have to admit I didn't earn half the stuff I was handed. He paused. I'm sorry. I didn't answer right away. Instead, I turned, opened Frankie's trunk, and pulled something out. A plaque, the same as the one on her back, but this one unmounted, blank on the edges. I handed it to him. He looked down, then up at me. You built that. Every letter, I said. He held it like it weighed more than it did. And then I said something I didn't expect. Take it. Hang it somewhere you'll see it. Remind yourself every day that not everything worth having is handed to you. He nodded, swallowed. I will. But before I could step back, Danielle's assistant rushed over. Sarah, she said breathless, you need to see this. She showed me her phone. The live stream had hit 3.4 million viewers. But that wasn't the shock. The comments were lighting up because someone else had just joined. A verified account. Big red checkmark. Netflix. They posted 5 words. Is she open to pitching? I read the comment again. Is she open to pitching Netflix? It felt like a joke, like someone was playing with me, a troll using a fake username to stir the pot, but the little red checkmark next to the name, that was real, verified, official, undeniable. Danielle was standing beside me, wide-eyed. They're serious, she whispered. I have a contact there. I'll text her now. I didn't even know what to say. 5 days ago, I was sleeping in a motel room off I-94 eating granola bars for dinner and hoping Frankie's tires wouldn't blow from stress and shame. Now I was the center of a live stream with millions of eyes. My parents looking at me with something like awe and the biggest streaming platform on earth asking if I had a story to pitch. I laughed. It burst out of me sudden, sharp, disbelieving. It wasn't a polite laugh. It was a let the air out of your ribs laugh. I bent over, hands on my knees, because it was too ridiculous to be true. And yet it was true. This was the moment the whole damn journey had been pushing toward. Not the Netflix part, I mean. Yeah, that was wild, but the fact that for once, for the first time, I was standing there and no one could call me dramatic or invisible or too much. I was undeniable. That night, Zoe hosted a bonfire in the gravel lot behind the event hall. It was tradition for the end of the showcase wine in paper cups, someone playing a guitar badly, and the hum of grease-stained voices sharing stories under the stars. I sat on the hood of Frankie with Rena and Carla from the bunk room. We watched sparks float into the dark, smelled the wood smoke, and let the ache in our bodies catch up to us. "So," Carla asked, nudging me with her boot, "Netflix?" I smiled. They reached out, Danielle setting up a meeting. Rena leaned back. "You gonna sell your life story?" "I might lease it," I said, "depends on the terms." We laughed, and for the first time in a long time, I felt something unshakable rising in me. Not revenge, not even pride. It was peace. But just as the conversation mellowed, Zoe appeared, pulling me aside with a whisper. "Something you need to see," she said. She handed me her phone. It was a video, not from a fan, not from the showcase. From Ethan. He'd posted a clip to his social media account, a selfie-style video in front of our parents' house, holding the second plaque I'd given him, the one that read, "Built by hands they never saw." In the video, he looked directly at the camera. "I want to say something," he began, "to the people who followed my sister, to the women who messaged me telling me what their brothers, fathers, or bosses did to them. You're right, I didn't deserve that car. I didn't build it. I didn't understand what it meant until I tried to take it." He paused, swallowing hard. "But now, I do. That plaque, it's hanging in my room, not because I earned it, but because I need to see it every day. I didn't just steal a car, I tried to steal someone's worth." And then the twist? I'm using my platform to start a scholarship for girls who want to go into mechanics, bodywork, engineering. It's called the Frankie Fund, because if we don't invest in hands we don't see, we'll keep pretending they don't exist. I had to sit down. Tears weren't dramatic anymore, they were just appropriate. Zoe looked at me, grinning. "Did you see that coming?" "No," I said, wiping my cheek, but maybe he finally did. The bonfire burned lower, people hugged, swapped numbers, promised to meet again next year. I sat in Frankie's driver's seat one last time that night, head resting against the wheel, engine quiet, her warmth still pulsing through the leather. And then my phone buzzed. "Danielle. Netflix wants a Zoom pitch. Monday, you ready?" I stared at the screen, then at Frankie's dash. My reflection shimmered in the chrome-ringed gauges, the plaque barely catching moonlight through the rear window. Ready. Maybe not, but willing. Hell yes. Just as I started typing my reply, a notification popped up. Another message. This one not from Netflix. Not from Danielle. Not from Ethan. It was from a woman named June Vasquez. The name didn't ring a bell at first, but her message did. "You don't know me, but I knew your birth mother. She used to drive a '68 Mustang, too." I froze. "You don't know me, but I knew your birth mother. She used to drive a '68 Mustang, too." June Vasquez. I must have read that message 10 times, each word hitting with the thud of a wrench dropped on concrete. Birth mother. I'd always known I was adopted. My parents never kept it a secret, but we never talked about her, the woman who carried me. In our house, she was a footnote, barely spoken of, like some distant weather system that had passed through once and left no trace. But now, here she was, or at least her echo. And that echo drove a Mustang. I messaged June back immediately. "I need to know everything." She replied fast. "I'm in Rockford, about an hour from Madison. Come see me tomorrow." I barely slept that night. My mind spun with impossible connections, the way I was drawn to cars before I even understood them. The aching familiarity of restoring Frankie. The instinct, not taught but inherited, of knowing how metal should bend. Was it blood? Was that even possible? The next morning, I packed my bag, slid behind Frankie's wheel, and drove through the pale sunrise like I was following a thread backward through time. June lived in a modest single-story home with a red door and a wind chime shaped like gears. She met me on the porch, maybe in her late 60s, skin sun-kissed and strong, wearing a faded t-shirt that said "Girls Wrench 2." Her eyes crinkled as she looked me over. "Yo, you've got her hands," she said, and her fire. Inside, she poured me sweet tea and laid out a worn photo album, edges curled, pages yellowed, and there she was. My mother. In oil-stained jeans, perched on the hood of a baby blue '68 Mustang with a wrench in one hand and the same cocky half-smile I'd seen in my mirror more than once. Her name was Alicia. She was one of the best mechanics I ever knew, June said. But back then, a brown girl in a garage full of men, they gave her hell. I nodded. Sounds familiar. She had you when she was 21. June continued, single, no support. She wanted more for you than small-town scraps and back-alley jobs. So, she made the hardest choice of her life. June reached into the album and pulled out a folded paper. A letter. Unopened, unread. My name's Sarah Monroe, written on the front in faded blue ink. She asked me to give this to you if I ever saw you again. I didn't think I would. I took it with shaking hands. The paper was soft, worn like it had been held 1,000 times. I unfolded it slowly, breathing in the scent of time, and began to read. My dearest Sarah, if you're reading this, you found me somehow, maybe by accident, maybe because the world finally gave you space to ask questions. Either way, thank you for coming. I don't know who you've become, but I hope you know that you were never unwanted. Not for a second. I didn't give you up. I gave you forward. Forward to something bigger than I could give. If you found this letter, maybe you've also found cars, or speed, or the joy in building things from your bare hands. If so, that's us. That's in your bones. Be bold. Make noise. And remember, what you build will always matter more than what you were handed. With all my love, Alicia. I cried. Not the shaky, silent kind from the motel. This was full body, shoulder shaking, floodgate crying. June sat with me, quiet, respectful. When I finally breathed again, I said, she sounds like someone I wish I'd known. June smiled. You do know her. Every time you fix something, you're speaking her language. Back in the car, I placed the letter on the dash. Frankie glowed in the afternoon sun, humming with purpose. The next day, I had my Zoom call with Netflix. Danielle helped prep me. I had bullet points, a pitch deck, even a working title built by hands they never saw. But when the meeting started, and they asked me to tell us what this story is really about, I didn't use any of it. I just told the truth. It's about a girl they overlooked, a car they underestimated, a brother who took what wasn't his, a family that had to learn how to see, a stranger who remembered a promise, and a mother who passed down more than genes, she passed down fire. They listened, every word. And when I finished, the screen was silent. Then one producer unmuted. That's not just a pitch, she said, that's a revolution. They made the offer that same week. And I said yes. A few months later, I stood on a soundstage in Atlanta, watching an actress in coveralls slide beneath a replica of Frankie, the camera lights reflecting off a fake oil pan while a boom mic hovered just above. I watched the scene play out not from the sidelines, but from a chair marked Story Consultant, my name in bold on the back. And I smiled. Not because it was a happy ending, but because I'd built it. With my own damn hands, just like she would have wanted. And somewhere in chrome, in gears, in the hum of Frankie's restored engine, I swear I could hear her voice. Not whispering this time, roaring.